This conference will now be recorded.
Excellent. So welcome everyone to this sixth seminar of the Ideal for OMOP training program. And in today's session, we'll be hearing lessons from the front line, we've called it, but from colleagues who have lived and breathed the experience that you guys are about to go through in terms of forming teams and starting to deliver studies. So hopefully some really relevant and interesting learning for you all today. You're probably familiar with the way this works now. So starting with introductions to our speakers, you know me, you know Will, but really pleased to have two new faces for you, Ellen and Gaber. And I will let them introduce themselves shortly, but I think for the purposes of today, one of the important things is that they went through the precursor program to Ideal for OMOP, a program called Ideal for RWE, which is in many ways this program is modeled on. So they have, as I said, they have lived and breathed what you guys have experienced. And I hope they've got some really, well, I know they've got some really interesting and insightful thoughts to share with you. So we're really grateful to Ellen and Gaber for being with us today and look forward to hearing what they have to say. However, before we get started on that, just a brief agenda. So as usual, just a quick recap of where we are in the program, just to help you orient. Then the main business today will be the learnings from the front line, hearing from Gaber and Ellen. We are then going to talk about some next steps for the program, because we are in a process of transition now as we pivot from the learning into the doing. So we'll talk quite a bit about that, and then we'll have a wrap up and close at the end. So let me start by just reminding us all where we are on the program. Again, I think you've probably got used to seeing this, the schematic by now, the little green arrow that moves a little bit further to the right every time we meet. And now where we are is we've basically completed this basic training. So the 6 seminars of basic training. We're now pivoting into the team formation and the application development for the funding. We'll tell you quite a bit more about that later today, so you're clear on what the next steps are. But what we have in mind is moving into that second stage of the program over on the right-hand side later in the year, when we pivot into the full funded protocol development or protocol implementation. And that will be really a very important part of your learning on the program, the actual experience of running studies. But as I say, that's in the future. Where we are today is for the last of our 6 seminars in this phase of the program. So many of you have been to a lot of these. So you'll remember we've had introduction to the concepts of OMOP. We've talked about study design. We've talked about the importance of involving patients. Last one we had was really interesting and important. It was about data privacy, governance, GDPR, making sure you've got the right approvals in place. And today, as I said, we're going to hear from firsthand some lessons from people who've been through this program or the precursor program to this. And then wrapping up with a little bit more on how to a little bit more on what to expect going forward. As we pivot, and again, you've seen this slide before, but just to remind you, we are not going away. The seminar program, or at least this bit of it, is coming to a close now, but there's lots more support that you're going to get. So there's expert advice, and you'll be hearing from some of these today, veterans of the previous program. There's a SharePoint website, there's a leadership advisory board, who we've heard from before. And then obviously, as you get to work together, you'll be learning quite a bit from each other. So as I say, I think you know this by now, I think you've seen this, but please don't feel that you're being abandoned or that you'll be alone in the next stage of the work. This is really something we want to provide as much support as we can to you. So with all that in mind, I'm now going to pass over to Gaber and Ellen, who will be telling us about their experience of working in real-world research through a training program like this, what they've learned, and the advice they might have for all of us, all of you, as you start to think about team formation studies and all those exciting things. So Gabba, Ellen, who's taking over now? Ellen.
Yes, I will start, and then thank you. So thank you very much for your introduction. So my name is Naderi. I'm a clinical oncologist working at the University Hospital in Oslo, Norway. And I'm going to share this presentation with Gabor Plavic, who's a radiation oncologist from Ljubljana in Slovenia. So as James was just saying, we took part in the IDEAL for Real World Evidence program that took place quite exactly 2 years ago. You can see the timeline of the IDEAL for Real World Evidence here, and as you can see, the timeline is somewhat shorter. If you press the next slide. Especially the delivery phase is substantially longer in your program. So just keep that in mind when we go through the timeline of our project. But otherwise, there are many similar aspects to it. So our thoughts was to lead you through the process of our group and our study concept and some of our results, and then at the end sum up some of our experiences, advice, challenges, and so on. Next.
Oops.
Yes, so
Oh,
yeah, it's there now. So in the beginning of, next once more. Okay, so in the beginning of June 2022, after having had these introductory seminars that are quite similar to the ones you have been going through this spring, we were divided into groups according to sort of tumor area of interest. And Gabor and I were placed then in the head and neck group, consisting of 5 members in total. So you see here a picture of Gabor and myself, and the other members were Chiara, a medical oncologist from Italy, Julia, who's a medical oncologist from Spain, and Rita, who's a data scientist from Portugal. Next.
sorry. Yeah. There we go.
It's a bit slow. Yeah. So yeah, you can take next again. So the first thing we did was to sit down together on Teams and try to come up with a framework for what kind of project we wanted to work on. And we decided to look at immunotherapy in patients with recurrent or metastatic head and neck squamous cell carcinoma. The reason for that being that there had been relatively recent approvals for nivolumab and pembrolizumab in 2017 and 18, meaning that we had about 4 to 5 years of data on the real world use of these drugs in this patient group. So we decided then to try to collect data which could guide us to find out whether the patients we were treating in our 5 different countries were comparable in terms of the treatment approach used, and then including treatment both preceding immunotherapy and succeeding immunotherapy, and also whether we are using the immunotherapy itself in the same way. So nivolumab versus pembrolizumab, monotherapy versus combination chemotherapy, the use in first-line metastatic, recurrent, or later lines, for instance. And finally, also to look at the outcome to see how the treatment results in the real world compared to what had been demonstrated in the phase 3 clinical trials leading up to the approval of these drugs. Next, please. So there was quite a busy period then between the middle of June and July 15th, which was our deadline to deliver our outline of the outcomes research team application. At the same time, we also handed in next the letters of support from our institutions, committing to giving us time during the remaining study period to devote some of our working hours to this project. Next. Then in August, we got the approval to continue working on this protocol and proceed to apply for the actual funding later that year. And so I think Gabor is going to take over from here to give you a bit more detail about the study itself.
Thank you, Eileen. Hello, everyone. My name is Gabor Plautz. As Eileen kindly introduced me, I'm from Institute of Oncology, Ljubljana, where I work as a radiation oncologist. This is in Slovenia. So to continue from where Eileen finished, so our objectives were, as Eileen said, to characterize this real-world population and to determine the types and timing of treatments preceding and following immunotherapy, and to find out the details and schedules of immunotherapy and immune-related adverse events in this cohort. There were many secondary objectives, mostly related to the survival intervals. And as you will see, the primary objectives were for us quite easy to achieve, to answer those questions. But we are still working on the secondary objectives. We'll return to this later. Next, please.
Sorry.
So inclusion criteria were quite straightforward, and we probably should say something about exclusion criteria, because if we were to do the study again today, we would choose to list different exclusion criteria, basically removing almost all of them, because at the end this is real world research, and we were quite sorry to say that other invasive cancer in the time period of 5 years before immunotherapy and to the study follow-up and the follow-up was an exclusion criteria, because we had quite a few patients that were excluded due to this reason. As you know, in head and neck cancer patients, the second primary cancers are not that rare. So if you are looking into the real world population, there should be almost no exclusion criteria. Next, please. I think there is something more coming up with this slide. Yes, and one more, please. So we were quite happy to start with a quite big number of participating centers. I can see there were 6 centers from 6 different countries at the beginning of the study. We aimed to include more than 500 patients. As you will see, this number was much lower at the presentation of the preliminary results. Just half of those patients were analyzed by the ESMO 2023, as you will see later. But on the other hand, we now have 3 additional centers from Leeds in England, from Brussels in Belgium, and from Lyon in France that are interesting, and that already collected the data to join our effort. So at the end, we are quite optimistic that we will probably achieve the planned number of included patients. Next, please. About index period, it was quite straightforward because head and neck cancers are not that common. We decided to include a like 5-year period just to get the numbers and to have. Please, James, maybe you can do another one just to have the sufficient follow-up. And we can move to the next slide. A lot of transitions. It's taking a while, but so if we focus a little bit on the methodology, so we collected data, as said before, at each collaborating centers. We had nice support from DIGICORE, so we had a day per week dedicated to this. It was a lot of work. And then we analyzed data at our centers. We did not share individual patient data. We were lucky to have Rita, one of our members from Portugal, that she's a biostatistician. She provided us with a quality check script, so we could assess the quality of our data before analyzing it. And then she also provided the preliminary result, R script, which we used to get results for our abstract that we presented at the ESMO Congress. And these results, aggregated data, was sent to the IPO. This is Institute of Oncology in Porto in Portugal, where a kind of meta-analysis was performed. So we discussed different kinds of statistical and analytical approach. One was individual patient data sharing. And interestingly, I was also a part of the breast team of the IDEAL4OMOP, where we opted for individual patient data sharing between centers. This is so, as you see, this is doable. The results of breast team are amazing, but it took quite a lot of time, and this approach is not possible in every center in Europe. So we, in the head and neck team, are happy to have decided for this type of analysis, meta-analysis, sharing aggregated data only. The third option is federated analysis, but the technical aspect of this was too complicated for our centers at that time. So maybe we can move to the next slide, please. And there are 4 animations on this slide. So you have OMOP. We didn't have anything, so we had to start from scratch. We created our own common data model, and we included lots of variables. So this is again a step that we would do differently if we could do it again today. Because we see that we have low quality data for quite a lot of variables, especially for adverse events and comorbidities and things like this. So James, maybe a click or more, or 2 more. But we anticipated quite a lot of things. We provided the centers with a detailed data guide. We already made table shells for the final analysis. But if we had opportunity, as we will discuss later, it would be wise to do a dummy run, just to see if our centers are able to provide all the data we planned for, because we would definitely see that we were not able to provide good quality data on all the variables that we planned for. Next, please. Yeah, budget was also a plan of a part of first planning. So we had also some problems with ethical committees, especially at Eileen's center. Maybe she can discuss this later if you have additional questions. But if you can imagine that if we had problems with sharing aggregated data, you can imagine that sharing individual patient data would pose even more problems. We can move to the next slide.
You getting those slide builds, Gabber? I'm not sure. It
Yeah,
does seem like it's taking a while to get through.
yeah.
Do
No
you
worries.
want to talk about this, or do you want me to move on?
We can move on. Yeah, we'll discuss this at one of the next slides. So yeah, here it is. This is our a part of our team at the ESMO 2023 Congress. We presented preliminary results, and there were quite a few people interested in seeing the final results of our study, and also asking if they can join us, but we're probably just we're not ready to participate in the planned time frame. So we are still working on our final results, but the first step was accomplished. So I think that this was a big step for us, and you can see even with our approach, which is not as refined as the one based on the OMOP could be, resulted in I think this successful presentation. Next slide, please.
Sorry, let me just.
So this is a little bit bigger slide. So just to describe the main findings of our initial analysis. So the first question for us was, are we treating the same patients across Europe? And the answer was mostly yes, except for the oropharyngeal cancers. This is nothing new. The HPV prevalence in the oropharyngeal cancer differs quite significantly, especially between the northwestern compared to the southeastern Europe. And surprisingly, there were big differences in number of lines of systemic treatment between centers. For example, in Oslo, where Elin is from, they never go beyond 4 lines, whereas in Portugal, we saw patients receiving 10 different lines of systemic treatment. So this is a good starting point for the additional analysis which are ongoing, because this treatment approach is really different and can have important consequences for the patients. The survival observed was similar to the phase 3 trials, and the differences between centers were a consequence of different reimbursements, second line, first line use of immunotherapy, and the combination with chemotherapy or use as a monotherapy was also more or less a consequence of different reimbursements. And interestingly, we saw big differences in adverse events. This has nothing to do with biology or between patients, but this is the result of different qualities of electronic health records. So this is something we should have anticipated in advance. We saw that serious adverse events were similar, were comparable between centers, but grade 1, grade 2, this is just major differences, results of different quality of data collection and electronic health records. I think this is my last slide, and I ask Elin to kindly continue.
Thank you. Yes, so you can go a couple of more to the next slide to complete this slide. Oh yeah, okay, go back to there. Thank you. Yeah, so our future perspectives, as Gabor already mentioned, we have had some additional centers joining us, for which we now have data. So that is something we have appreciated a lot, that people have been interested to join in, and of course expanding the number of patients that we can analyze from, but also expanding the regions of Europe that we can compare data between sites and countries. And then we do have plans to go deeper with our analysis than we did for the ESMO abstract, to look more closely at differences in patient characteristics and treatment patterns, both when it comes to surgery, radiation therapy, and systemic anti-cancer treatment. Also, the survival that we've analyzed so far was by index date, so by starting at initiation of immunotherapy, and we believe that some of the major differences in survival would probably be due to the fact that some centers were able to use immunotherapy in first-line metastatic settings, while others have to do it in second line. So essentially, we were comparing patients who were further into their metastatic disease. So we would like to also look at survival with the starting point of the first line of therapy in the recurrent or metastatic setting to better compare actual survival between centers. So that's something we are working on now, developing the scripts for that. Next, please. Yeah, so you can just click on all the animation there, so we don't have to do that while as I'm speaking. So couple of more, I guess. So while that's coming, we have a couple of slides now at the end, just summing up some of the opportunities that has been offered to us by participation in the IDEAL for real-world evidence, some of the challenges that we have faced, and some advice for those of you in the IDEAL4OMOP now who are just entering a similar program to this. So first of all, just to say that I think we all agree that IDEAL for real-world evidence really has offered great opportunity for us. I think to most of us, research on real-world data and generation of real-world evidence was quite new, and we've learned a lot through the courses and through the practical experience we've gained through this project. It's also been a great opportunity for us to network with centers and colleagues across Europe, and then it has made it possible to perform cross-institutional benchmarking and research. And we've also initiated participation in related projects as a result of the new network that has been formed as part of this program. So that's been really a great advantage for us all, I think. We've written a time commitment here. I mean, it is in this program, of course, a commitment from our centers that we should be able to use about 20% of our working week to this project. But I guess as for most projects and most research projects, I guess you would have to expect some commitment of time outside working hours as well, especially in the more intensive phases of such a research project. And we've also seen that, institutional commitment to allocate time for projects within working hours differs. So I think both Gabor and I have had good experiences with our institutions, but we know that other colleagues have struggled and had to do maybe more work in their spare time. So it's an important thing to keep in mind when expressing what to expect from your co-workers in the project. As was mentioned by Gabor, it's always good to take into account that especially ethics approvals may take a lot of time. So one thing I've learned was that I should have started the process earlier. I guess I had this vision that I had to have the complete protocol finished before I handed it into our ethics committee. I think today I would have started the process with the outline only, so that you can get the process going. So that's a very specific advice that I could give. At least start as early as possible with your ethics committee, and also early on investigate whether ethics approval is actually necessary. There are some exceptions in institutions where you have a broad consent by patients already. There are also exceptions for pure benchmarking projects that do not all need ethics approval, but can go straight to privacy offices. So that's worthwhile exploring before using a lot of time on the ethics approvals. As Gabriel alluded to as well, we've seen that it's easy to have a lot of ambition of everything that you want to analyze in your data, and it can be a good idea to start simple and then rather build complexity as you go along by expanding the number of sites, but also the depth of analysis and maybe the number of variables. As Gabriel also mentioned, do expect patient attrition compared to your initial estimate of patients. So our estimated inclusion was 530 patients, and on our ESMO abstract, we had included 272 patients. Not all of these patients are lost for later analysis because some we were just not able to include in time due to data quality issues that can or partly have been already or can be improved. But there will always be some attrition due to patients that turn out to not match your inclusion criteria. But then, as Gabor also spoke about, we have seen that we were too strict with our exclusion criteria. We all, I guess, came from a tradition of clinical trials and were very focused on these typical exclusion criteria that are applied to phase 3 trials, and they are probably not necessary and possibly not really correct to include in a real world study. So such things as metachronous or synchronous cancers can be allowed, and maybe also to include treatment given as part of clinical trials. Another piece of advice we would have to give is that there will be sometimes uneven distribution of knowledge and skills. In our group, we are 4 clinicians and 1 data scientist, and we've seen that this puts a disproportionately high workload on the data scientist in several parts of the project, not to mention now the late phases where we want to do this deeper analysis of our data. So our advice would be that if you have only 1 data scientist in your group, maybe set aside some of the funding to assure some additional institutional support for for data analysis. And as Gabor also mentioned, if you have availability of data that can be used, to run a dummy run, that can probably save you a lot of trouble later on in the analysis by early on identifying unforeseen obstacles that might turn out to take a lot of time to to correct later. Next slide, please. Yes, so in the end, just some advice more directed maybe to the group dynamics. We saw from our group and the other groups in the Ideal for Real World Evidence that the way that the groups were organized differed quite a lot. We chose a rather flat structure where we had rotating responsibility 2 or 3 months at a time for calling Teams meetings, setting up agenda, writing meeting minutes, and so on. And I think a good an advantage of that was giving the whole of the group a kind of sense of ownership to the project, and it worked quite well for us. Whereas other groups chose more of a hierarchy with a more defined leader of the group. And which model to choose, I think, depends on many variables. Group size is one. I think the flat structure can be manageable with a small group as ours, but if you have more than 6 members, maybe that will be difficult. Also, depends on personalities and skills. I mean, if you have a very skilled and well, people who have already had experience in leading projects, maybe it would be an advantage to have them lead the project for you. When it comes to communication within the groups, we had the regular Teams meetings. We used the collaboration hub that DIGICORE provided to share working documents. And then we had email correspondence, but also a WhatsApp group, which was really convenient, where when, you know, it was important to convey messages which couldn't really wait long, and you couldn't be guaranteed that people were on their working email account. For instance, there was quite a hectic activity in this WhatsApp group the night before the submission deadline to ESMO, so that can be a good idea to add for communication. We would recommend discussing authorship early on, setting clear rules for maybe the number of authors from each center, and also the requirements to adhere to the Vancouver rules and guidelines for authorship, so that everyone is clear on what is required. And just a few words about the group dynamics at the end. I think it's important just to be open and honest about your own capacity and motivation to contribute throughout the collaboration, not necessarily stating all private details of why you can struggle to set aside time for this in periods, but just say, you know, that for the next couple of months, I'm sorry, I will not have the capacity to contribute as much. Will make it much more predictable for the others in the group and easier for the collaboration. And from the other aspect of it, I think one should be able to expect others to contribute, but should also be respectful of differences in capacity, both between individuals and over time. But when there is an even contribution, and I guess there always will be, it's important, I think, to really acknowledge those who take responsibility and drive the project forwards, both in informal ways by giving positive feedback, but also in more formal ways when it comes to making decisions about authorship order and who is to present the project and in different arenas, so that you know, those who contribute more also gain some of the advantages of authorship and honor in a way for the work that has been done. Yes, so I guess we'll end there and just sum up by, you know, trying to obtain a clear vision of your goal quite early on and have realistic planning from the outset can really be helpful in navigating through such a project and overcome obstacles along the way. So yeah, thank you. That was the end of our presentation.
Thank you very much indeed. And I in a moment, will give an opportunity for people to ask questions of their own, but just while people are perhaps marshalling their thoughts on that, I have an observation and a question for each of you. So firstly, I think the observation is just how far you've come. So if you imagine this time 2 years ago, you were a group of people, as you've said, without a huge amount of experience in real world data or real world evidence, having gone through this process, you know, with the ESMO poster, with the study ongoing, with the continuing addition of sites, additional sophistication. I think it's an absolutely fantastic achievement, and really just I think a testimony to the hard work, but also the kind of a sense of the practical, you know, your practical sensibilities and some of the wisdom you've shown in presenting. So anyway, that's my observation. Right, really well done. But actually also for the people who are on the call today, you know, a little vision of what things might be like in 2 years' time, you know, or you know, as you form these teams, develop these relationships, build the network, and end up in you know, in a position that you guys are now. My question for you is just, I suppose, more of a personal one about your careers. You know, having been through this, if you think this is kind of going to influence what you look to do in the future? Has it kind of opened up new opportunities to you? You know, how do you think this will impact what you do in your careers, sort of going forward?
Yes, yeah, I can start that. I mean, it definitely has had an impact for me. As I said, I came into this really with no experience of real world data research, and being part of this. I mean, one thing is this project and this study in itself, which we are now expanding and working further on. But it also led to my involvement in my institute's application for being part of the DigiOne network, and I've had a project leader position in that pilot now for 1.5 years, and as a result of that has in now again been involved in new projects involving secondary use of data at my institution. So this really opened a new path of projects that I'm working on in addition to my clinical work at the moment.
Thank you.
Yes, if I can add to this, from my point of view, there are like two major aspects of what I've had gained from this is the ability to more realistically assess the feasibility of new real-world projects. Now I'm more aware of the possible obstacles, but the second thing is that I have many contacts from all across Europe now. So whenever I've been thinking about new projects or planning new projects in the past 2 years, I've been thinking more internationally, which I wasn't before. And we already started some other projects, also including ELIN, that are not related to this team, but some other aspects of head and neck cancer. So I think it will be much easier for future projects to include different centers from across Europe, and this is really useful for my research. So I'm really grateful to this project for this.
And if sorry,
great.
if I can just
Sorry,
add one more thing, which has been really useful, is the kind of the mix of participants and the close work with the data scientists, which has been really useful and has taught me a lot about their side of the work as well.
Yeah, and that's really good to hear. And you know, in our mind when we were starting IDEAL4RWE, just as for IDEAL4OMOP, this is something we want to provide practical and tangible benefits for you. You know, clearly digital health, real world data continues to be an increasing area. We've seen more and more funding coming in. Many of the people on the call today have links to the I3 sites and that big bid we got there. So, you know, if through the network and the skills is actually helping you chart your own path through your career, then that really, I think, has been a big success for us. So let me open it up to others. If anyone else has got any questions, please speak up. Don't be shy. Well, I'll maybe offer just another quick reflection then, and then see if that prompts any other questions. Obviously, the big difference between the program you went on and this program is that we are now looking to work with sites that have an OMOP instance. So a lot of the work that you did and had to do around developing your own common data model, I think will be avoided. I hope they'll create work in other areas as sites develop their own OMOP instance. But also the fact that we're using this MEDOC minimum data set, I think that would probably constrain a little bit more. It might actually make it easier to pick some simpler research objectives earlier on, because we're not really looking at things, or not in a position yet to look at things like AEs, adverse events, which clearly were quite problematic for you guys. So that is one thing, I think, as people listen to this, just to make sure that, you know, there are some differences, but I think so much that's common in terms of your journey building networks and getting the experience of conducting research. So I'll open it up again, maybe for one last time, to see if anyone does have any questions for Gabor and Ellen.
Hi,
Eric.
I have a question. Yeah, thank you very much for this nice presentation. I have a question regarding the sharing of the data. I have experience with working with other consortia around Europe, and especially I don't know if it's the same case for the whole Europe, but in the Netherlands we have very strict laws about data sharing. Is always an issue that takes a long time sharing patient level data. So how effective is the sharing, and how complicated is also sharing of aggregated data? Does it require less time? And in the statistical part, how does it work?
Yes, maybe I can start answering this question. So sharing just the aggregated data, just the results of the analysis that is performed at individual centers, has its limitations, because the analysis is basically a meta analysis, similar to what you can see in meta analysis from systematic reviews. But the difference is that the data is collected in the same way, so it's of a better quality. But for the outcomes that we have mentioned, including survival outcomes, for example, Kaplan-Meier curves, Cox regression models, and things like that, this is appropriate way to do it. So you can get quite nice analysis even with this approach. On the other hand, in the breast cancer team, our approach was to share individual patient data, and the research question was really complicated. You know, the effect of lower paclitaxel dose in neoadjuvant chemotherapy in triple negative and HER2 positive breast cancer on the outcomes. But anyway, we managed to get nice results from that as well. So I think each approach has advantages and disadvantages, but both are doable and both can lead to useful results that provide scientific community with something useful. Yeah.
Thank you, Gabor. And Eric,
Thank you.
the other thing I think to bear in mind is that, you know, in the OMOP world, and with the developments in federated analysis that were touched on in seminar 5, I think that is maybe a way that we can go that, you know, gives us the benefit of data remaining on site, but actually some of the research sophistication that you can get moving towards what you might get with patient data. So to you and to others, if you haven't had a chance to look at seminar 5, I would recommend that. Good, thank you, Eric. Any other questions?
If I just add one more point to that, Eric, and I think Gabor and Ellen mentioned it, but making friends with your data guardian on your sites will be hugely helpful, and getting their input as early as possible on a study. I think we found in the past more on sort of commercial studies, there's not always a great understanding of real world studies, and it's kind of gone into the same bucket as a clinical trial sort of approach. And often where there's not a consenting of patients, it kind of triggers lots of alarms inside an organization that don't necessarily need to be triggered. And so having that kind of early conversation around the risks, around the actual data being shared, and different allowances, because every center, every institution has a slightly different appetite for that risk. So it's well worth having an early conversation as you're developing a study protocol, so that when you come to then apply, there's already an agreement within the organization. There's already an understanding of what it entails.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just one last call for any final questions before we move on. Okay, well, look, I think this is just absolutely fantastic. I think it's fantastic how far you guys have come on the head and neck project, and there's 2 other projects that got funding that have been on similar journeys. And I would also really kind of encourage people to, on the program, to think that this could be you. This could be the path that you take over the next couple of years, and the kind of insight and development, career development that you could expect. However, things do slightly change in nature now, because so far it's largely been us providing seminars and talk content to you. This is where the onus increasingly falls on you to organize and start the work, to form teams and prepare submissions. So I want to pass over to Will now, who's going to talk a little bit more about that process, what to expect, and actually practically and concretely what you should be starting to do now. So over to you, Will.
Thanks very much, James. Yeah, the south of England is poorly served, obviously, with internet compared to the north. So hopefully these builds will work with James's internet connection, but forgive us if it doesn't. I just had to get that in. So just a reminder, IDEAL4OMOP, as IDEAL4RWE, is very much designed as a facilitated space to build your research collaborations. So what we wanted to do is make this a place where you can bring your skills, your databases, your cancer interests, your individual experience, your research time, and kind of practice building a collaboration, applying for funding in a competitive way, all within a facilitated space, a safe space where you can learn these skills and then go on in your careers and practice them. That is the aim. So I'm going to build this picture. The bedrock, if you like, is those things. And what we've done with the webinars is we've built you a foundation. And all these webinars are available on SharePoint for review to go back to. In addition to that foundation, we also have then the learnings from the previous program, which Gabor and Ellen didn't have the benefit of so much. So through the webinars, we tried to build a foundation. The next stage then of this building is, if you like, the scaffolding. And this is our continuing support from IDEAL4OMOP for you going on from here. This is the end of the webinar sessions planned, and now it's on to the next steps, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So the scaffolding that we have to support this study is the collaboration hub, which hopefully many of you will have had a chance to look at. And on there at the moment is that there's file space for you to share your own documents as study teams. There's lists of contact details, emails of others who have an interest in particular indications. And this is to help you begin to find those collaborators, much as Gabor and Ellen did on the previous program. So that's available now, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. If you haven't, please do go to the SharePoint and have a look at that, because that's a good start for building your study teams. What we'll also bring as part of that scaffolding then is study templates, and these are application documents effectively, and this will be we'll be asking you to submit your study ideas, which will be then reviewed by the lab, which we'll go on to in a few minutes. We'll provide then the templates to do that. We're not asking you to okay, just create a document from scratch. We'll supply templates. What we'll also do is give you examples of other studies that have been done within DIGICORE, which will help you look at, okay, this is what's required in doing a real world study. And we'll try to make that as OMOP focused as possible, but those will be available by 12th of July, and we'll circulate those on email. Again, we'll put them on SharePoint, so that will be a good basis for you to begin to build your studies. The next thing we have is the advice from our Leadership Advisory Board and a review of your submissions and your projects, and this will be between September and November this year. We'll be asking you to make a submission to them of your project ideas, and we'll create a space where you can talk with these more expert, more experienced people in real world evidence, and they will provide some helpful, hopefully, advice on how you might go about building your project. And finally, there'll be ongoing checkpoints. James and I will be available on the training email as usual, but also be checking in with the study teams periodically. So that's the scaffolding. And why are we building this scaffolding? Because finally, over to you now, next one, James, is to build your study. So all of this is in place so that we actually build a study. And this is starting now as you're beginning to form study teams, and this will go right on through to the end of the program, which I think is December 2025. And this will be building the sort of study that you just had described to you by Ellen and Gabor, a multinational collaborative study looking at your data sets, which can go on to ESMO and publications and careers in real world research, that the sky's the limit for you. So this is just to say, your role is to build this building. That is really what the participation in the program is now. It's beginning to build this building, and it will be your building, and we can advise and we put the scaffolding around it, but this is your building. So if you go to the next slide, James. So just a reminder then of the timelines from here. We flagged on the last seminar, and we've done it on email as well. This is the time to form teams. And agree some study objectives, decide on a research question that you're going to look at on an indication basis. And then through summer is to begin to plan that first submission, which we'll provide a template for. And that will come to the lab in mid-September. As I said, they will then review those. We'll have a checkpoint with the lab where they can give advice around the scope of the study, your ambition, what you're trying to achieve. And then we'll ask you then to submit a fuller protocol, which will include some costings of backfilling people's time to deliver the work. And those will be, again, judged by the lab and the winners. The projects that are going to be funded will then be announced at the DIGICORE conference Connect to Win, which will be in Utrecht, I think, this year, James. 25th, 27th of November. Okay, so a little bit more detail then on next steps. Next slide, please, James. So as I said, the first point now is to build or find a study team. And we've already got a team in colorectal that's beginning to form, and one participant has put out a lung research question as well. I'm not sure there's been much response yet on that. But any of the other indications that you're interested in, please do take the plunge. Get those email lists from SharePoint. If you haven't got access to SharePoint, please contact us. We can just email those contact lists to you, and start to build. Introduce yourself to the group. See who else is available. See who else is wanting to do a study for you. Again, we're happy to try and facilitate this, but this is over to you. This is you building your collaboration. What we will do is, if you haven't had any success in finding a team, but you really want to be part of a study team, please do get in touch. And we'll be checking in by the 19th of July before everyone disappears for the summer, and try to place people as far as possible if you've not managed to do that yourself. We'll also publish then the study teams as they are formed on SharePoint, so that everyone can see what study teams are forming. There's nothing final in this. You can join a team and then decide to join another one, or things change. That's absolutely fine. But during the summer, you'll begin to need to write up your first submission for a study. So we need to get this done fairly quickly. We'd recommend that you schedule regular calls, particularly thinking about summer and momentum through the summer. It's quite hard to get hold of people. So as soon as you have a study team forming, put some calls in the diary where you can just start allocating tasks, decide how you're going to run as a team, whether you do that kind of rotational leadership like it's been described here, or whether you have an overall leader who's kind of managing it. That's up to you. There's strengths and weaknesses in both model. But we recommend that you schedule those calls early on so that you've got those touch points where you can keep momentum. And then you're preparing this study proposal document. As I said, a template will be provided. It'll be about 7 to 10 pages in very clear sections from the template. And this will be largely outlining the team members, the data sources that you're proposing to use, the research questions, and your summary study synopsis. And these will be submitted to the lab. They will look at these, they will review them for feasibility, and we will have a session early October where there's an opportunity for each study team to meet with the lab. It'll be online, but it'll be kind of live and just discuss and maybe answer questions about their study, allow that experience then to come in and shape the proposal that you're building. Very soon after that, because of the submission in November, you'll need to be developing a fuller study protocol. Again, we'll provide a template for that, and that'll probably need to be a bit of that work in parallel while you're waiting for the lab to review your initial one. And that will be including a budget, as I said before, of how much time, and we'll give you some guidance around that, and more detailed methodology and more detailed project timelines. And that the review and discussion on those protocols will be competitive then. At this point, if we've got 5 good solid protocols, the lab will have to choose according to the funding that we have to support studies, which ones have greatest merit, which ones they think are going to be realistically to go. I think in the IDEAL4OMOP we had 4 submissions and 3 of those were actually funded in the end. So that will be a competitive review. And again, this is to facilitate the sort of space of what you will do if you need to apply to a Horizon bid in Europe or any other research funding. This will be the process, but hopefully it'll be a slightly friendlier process within IDEAL4OMOP because we'll be there to advise and discuss with you all the way along. And as I said, then those will be submitted to lab, and the studies that will go on forward with the additional support of some funding, which will backfill some of your time to deliver these projects, will be at Connect to Win. Are there any immediate questions on those timelines? I know we've got to time and people will start dropping off, but any clarity on that required? Now, this may feel daunting to some. Obviously, it's very much easier with a team together. So build or find your study team. If there's not a study team forming in what you want, be bold and say, I haven't got any research questions, but I'd like to work in whatever it is, and contact those others who've been on the course and see what you get, and away you go from there. Okay, I think yeah, one more slide then. We'd be really grateful for your feedback on the webinars and the course so far. So we've got a short feedback form. I've copied the link into the chat as well. But yeah, we'll be circulating this on email. It should take you a couple of minutes, but we'd really like to hear how you found the course so far, and we'll input some useful information for going forward as well. So we'll be very grateful for that, and we'll probably chase you if you don't complete it. So you might as well just complete it. And I think that's it from me. James, am I handing back to you?
Yes, I think so. So let's just give a chance. Are there any sort of further questions anyone's got about next steps in the process? Is everything clear? Okay. Well, I guess really just to recap and close out for today then, thank you again to Ellen and Gabber. I think it really is very helpful just to see the, the practical learnings that you guys have had that may be able to that may be able to help people avoid a problem or a challenge that they might otherwise have faced. I think it's fantastic how far you guys have come, and it's really nice to hear just how this is shaping your career and the opportunities that it's open for you. So very many thanks to you for that. And really the kind of the challenge, exactly as Will was saying now, is we've got the foundations, we've got the scaffolding, but it's up to you guys to build the house. So go on the SharePoint, find people with the email list of people who work in similar areas to you, get in touch, start to work things out. And then over the coming months, with our support, hopefully you can start to set the wheels in motion to be doing something like this, to be publishing posters at ESMO and starting to get increasing opportunities in your career for real world evidence. So thank you very much to Gabor and Ellen. Thank you also to Will for that super clear summary at the end. Otherwise, wishing you all a very good Wednesday evening. I hope whatever the weather is, wherever you are, it's unseasonably hot or cold, I hope you deal with it okay. And really just one last thing to say for me, as we come to the end of these seminars, there's one name that has been resolutely and consistently on the screen in front of us, and that is Alex White, who has been a huge support in just running these webinars, getting them set up, organizing the recording. And I wanted to say a big thank you to Alex for all the work he's done for us. As we move forward, we'll be slightly changing our approach and platform. But for the moment, thank you very much, Alex. It's been very much appreciated. Otherwise, it's, thank you very much indeed. Have a good evening. Let us know if you've got any questions. Goodbye.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.